Well, welcome to the library. We're delighted you could be here today. My name is Anya Crichton, and I work right here at the library in the Literary Initiatives team. I'm lucky to work very directly with the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature, who you will meet in a minute. I also work on the National Book Festival, and we hope we see you there. It's August 24th in the Convention Center. Please join us. We have a very special program for you today. You can see them filing in right here. In celebration of Women's History Month, we have three incredible women here to talk to you about their work and the women that inspired them. Chelsea Clinton, Rita Williams-Garcia, and Meg Medina. Let's give them a round of applause. I'll tell you just a little bit about them right now. Chelsea Clinton is the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, She Persisted, 13 Women Who Changed the World, and other books in the She Persisted series, covering topics like history, sports, science, and global health. She is also the vice chair of the Clinton Foundation, where she works on many initiatives, those that help empower the next generation of leaders. Welcome, Chelsea. Rita Williams-Garcia, a legend in her own right, is the celebrated author of novels for young adults and middle grade readers. Her most recent novel, Clayton Bird Goes Underground, won the 2018 NAACP Image Award for Literature for Youth and Teens. Williams-Garcia is most known for her Coretta Scott King award-winning Gaither Sisters trilogy that begins with One Crazy Summer. Meg Medina is the current National Ambassador for Young People's Literature. She's an award-winning and New York Times best-selling author who writes picture books. In fact, I have one as my folder. It held my notes, so here's one exact, just for you all. This is Evelyn Del Rey Se Muda. This is the Spanish version. Mango Abuela and Me, plus young adult books like Burn Baby Burn and Yaku Delgado Wants to Kick Your Ass. We're in the Library of Congress. It's okay, you can laugh. When she's not writing, Meg is working on community projects as well as her platform, Cuéntame, Let's Talk Books, and I can't wait for her to tell you more about her job as ambassador. Without further delay, please help me welcome Meg, Chelsea, and Rita.
Here we are. Hola. It's so nice to have you. Isn't this a lovely room? Yeah, the whole library is beautiful, but this is one of my favorite rooms. I'm Meg. I am the 8th ambassador, and as ambassador, my job is to be a book friend to the nation's children. So that's kind of a big, tall order. That means I go to schools and libraries all across the country, and I talk to kids about their reading life, their relationship to books. Cuéntame, Let's Talk Books is my platform, and it focuses on helping kids know how to talk to each other about books quickly and with enthusiasm and mostly with love. I am working on a video series where kids can meet authors online, so to speak, in video form. And what is the third part? Office hours, right. Quarterly, if you would like to come and visit with me during my office hours, we meet here. And your kids can come with their bag of books. They can tell me anything they think is important for me to know about their reading life. They give me recommendations all the time, and I give them recommendations all the time. So please be on the lookout. The next office hours are April 21st, 20th, and I think in the next couple of weeks, the sign up for the lottery will be made public. I'm going to let my two friends here also introduce themselves. Chelsea, why don't you tell us about your work?
Oh, sure. Thank you so much. And I would thank Anya and everyone here at the Library of Congress for welcoming us so warmly on a somewhat chilly, rainy day. It feels like perfect library weather. So I'm really happy to be here with all of you, and particularly to see all of the young readers in the audience. As you heard in the introduction, I am very proud and grateful that I get to wear lots of hats, including that as an author. I've written more than a dozen books, most for young readers, early chapter books and picture books, although a couple for adults as well. And I'm just really thankful to be here with two women that I admire so much, and in a community who believes that the stories we tell and the people who tell those stories really matter during Women's History Month, of course, but I also believe probably every month of the year. So thank you so much for having me.
Hello, I'm Rita Williams-Garcia, and I am so happy to be here with you. It gives me such delight to see so many young faces sitting out there. My writing began when I was about your age, and probably even younger. I just fell in love with stories, so I just thought, oh, I can make up my own stories, and I made them up all the time. And so I still, now I get paid for it. Big difference. And so just being able to just share my love of writing, storytelling, making things up, that's the joy of this work, sharing it and letting you know what I'm thinking, what I'm imagining, and then hearing from you what you think about my books. And I actually really do love to hear the comments across the board. I think that's what makes this library so great. It's so many different opinions and perspectives. And so that's what I want to always open up, is just avenues for you to kind of get in touch with what you think and how you express yourselves. So I hope there's a whole lot of budding writers out there of all ages.
Okay, so let's jump right in. First of all, it's Women's History Month. How fabulous is that? Woo! So I thought that the first thing that we should try to unpack together is what is it that you feel is really vital about Women's History Month right now in 2024? What is it about this celebration that you think is really key?
Well, I think women are so at the forefront of what we're thinking about here and now. We've come a long way, baby. When I was touring this building, there were a lot of depictions of men, but not of women being included in the Library of Congress and its building and foundation. And so we have come a long way as a nation. Women had to fight for the vote, right? And that's in our recent history. Yes, 100 years is recent history. And so then there were the picture of the congressional officers and the congressmen, all men. And now that picture does not hold true. And it was all white men, and now that picture does not hold true. And so, you see that women are at the forefront of all of every part of change, and that it's positive change. And so that's why women's voices right now, especially as women think about, have to think more about their own freedoms, their personal freedoms. That's why this year is so important for women, because we have achieved so much. We're in all areas of science, medicine, politics, the arts, you name it, women are doing it. That glass ceiling should not exist. Look at all these young girls out here. They're all doing all kinds of different things. I saw all of those craft drawings and all the different projects that the young people are working on. They don't think about, well, I'm a girl, I can only do this. No, that's archaic thinking. So that's why That's why this year is so important, because we have to lay the foundation and keep it open for young people just to burst through and to keep on rising.
What do you think?
Oh goodness, amen. I was thinking while Rita was sharing her kind of thoughts about one of the women in the She Persisted chapter book series who was incredibly and kind of eternally inspiring to me, Coretta Scott King, who spoke about how we have to protect and defend progress in every generation as well as advancing it. And so thinking about, I think what Rita said, we have to kind of protect the advances we made for women to be in the sciences and the arts and politics and advocacy and kind of every aspect of life, while of course recognizing that yes, like as Rita said, the pictures may not look the same, but we still are not at equal kind of representation or equal presence or equal pay. And so we have to keep protecting the progress, but working kind of toward a world in which everyone, regardless of gender, is able to kind of pursue our dreams, be paid to pursue our dreams, kind of equal to men, and to continue to change what we all kind of believe to be possible, for any of us. And I would say too, sitting here in the Library of Congress, it's also, I think, quite extraordinary to think about how the library's kind of true library of authors has changed. And so Rita was talking about the photographs, but also just thinking about the books that are held here and in the kind of caverns that exist for all of the extraordinary books that kind of Americans write and publish every year. We are making progress. We are starting to ever be, I think, moving toward the more perfect union that we can be, but we can't mistake progress for success. We have to keep kind of advancing progress in our photographs, in our literature, and most of all, of course, in our reality.
I'm feeling in 2024, first of all, so gratified to see so many dads and granddads and so on, and brothers here as well. Just a celebration of the female lens, the female experience, the female point of view in literature and in so on. It feels to me like it wasn't so long ago when people were thinking about girl books and boy books, and they were dividing the reading experience very much like that. And so for me, when I'm thinking of Women's History Month, it's to celebrate everyone who made it possible for the three of us to be sitting here right now in the position that we're in. And it's also to keep broadening the celebration to include, everyone celebrating this, not just, just having girls celebrate it, International Women's Day and so on. Chelsea, one thing that I have learned about you recently is that you have advanced degrees in public health, and that is your area of expertise. And I'm really curious about the relationship that you see between reading and public health and children's health and the health of a family. Can you give us some thoughts on that?
Well, sure. I think we have a lot of evidence of kind of the inequity that exists when those linkages are broken down. I mean, just even in the question you asked, or the relationship that you presume between kind of reading and health and kind of family health. And yet we know if people don't know how to read, don't have literacy skills, they are less likely to be able to advocate kind of for their health or for their family's health, or to know kind of what questions to be asking of a school nurse for their child, or in a clinic for themselves. And so certainly there is a clear kind of set of connections between whether or not someone's able to read and whether or not they can effectively kind of self-advocate and advocate for their families. As we know, every parent would of course kind of want and be called to do. I also though think having books that kind of look like our communities and look like our families is also part of good public health. Having children see themselves kind of in the books that they're reading at home and at school helps them have a better sense of kind of identity and place in the world and possibility And that, of course, relates to their mental health and their mental well-being, but also to their kind of physical health and their physical well-being, and then how able they are to support others in their healthy kind of development and kind of sense of self and place in the world. So I think, you know, we often focus on kind of the negative of your question of what do we know is true when these things aren't connected. I think that is important because, of course, like everyone who is able to learn to read deserves the chance to be able to be fully literate and to engage in the world in the ways in which like words enable us to navigate forward in our imaginations and in our realities. But I also think it's really important that we think about the connection between stories and kind of who we see and who we don't see, and kind of individual community well-being, because I think it's so clear to me when we see, to your earlier kind of point, Meg, here on Women's kind of History Month in this extraordinary library, when we see how both young girl but also young boy readers react to stories like the ones that you've written, you know, where girls are centered, where kind of it's told through a woman's voice, and just the better health of self, but also relationships and family and community are built when we all see ourselves in stories, but when we also see other people who don't look like us in stories.
I feel like it wasn't so long ago that there were lots of stereotypes around centering girls in a book, right? Like boys won't read a book that centers a girl. And I am so encouraged by contemporary librarians for many reasons, but one of them is trying to dispel this myth, you know? So in She Persisted, it began as this extraordinary picture book and turned into this chapter book series that now has, so there's 13 women in the picture book, but there's 35, right? And so I have so many questions. And I'm trying to decide, do I start with Rita on this question, or do I start with John? I'm going to Rita. Okay, so Rita, when you got the invitation, because I got an invitation also, and they had the list of all the incredible women, what was that like for you when you were invited by Chelsea Clinton to write a book in her series?
Okay, so I definitely wanted to do it, but I had to get permission from my daughters. They are my caretakers, and they are my advisors. This is the wonderful thing about watching your children grow up. They make great decisions, and you can trust them. So I said, so which one should I do? And they were like, Mom, we were both in track and field. Florence Griffith Joyner.
Flojo.
You know, so that, you know, so it was, if I did not choose Florence Griffith Joyner, I would not be invited for Thanksgiving. I would not be able to hold grandchildren, you know. That aspect alone, just to have that connection with my daughters, was wonderful. But then there came the part that I really love, is like the digging into the person. See, I read the picture book, and there was, you'd be surprised what Chelsea has put in one paragraph about one person. And so from everything from her being able to like chase and catch a jackrabbit, I was like, all right, I like this girl. All right. So, you know, so there's so much about her family that I just, it was, and she didn't even have a book about herself. And so, but there were all of these newspaper articles, all of these magazine articles. There were all of these, the tapes of her races on YouTube, good old YouTube, and interviews. And so she had such a big life that just extended beyond track and field, so much so that I didn't know where to begin. Because like Florence, when she started, when she was about your age, she wanted to do everything. So she kind of did everything. So there was a whole lot to go through and to try to synthesize into a cohesive story. But they all kind of just come around to that point that, yes, the world is wide open to you. You know, you have to persevere. You might fail a few times, but you can go for it. You can do everything that you set your sights on. You may not get to the places that you want to, but nothing is closed to you. And so that made me really want to do Florence Griffith Joyner.
Oh, I know. In the book that you wrote, I loved how you described the races that she failed in, right? Like where she didn't achieve where she wanted, what she wanted to achieve, and she kept persevering. The persistence. When I got the note, so there was Sonia Sotomayor's name. That was the first name that was there. There's no bigger. I was so thrilled and terrified. And then, Chelsea Clinton, the other part of your genius in this is that they also sent us all the other writers who were also going to be working on. And I said, well, I want to be in this club. They worked like amazing people. Of course, I'd want to publish with them. So it was an easy yes. How did you pick, first of all, the 13 that were in your picture book, but then how do you go about picking, because there are there's more than 35 amazing women in the world, yes, right? So, but how do you pick them?
Oh gosh, so lots of questions in there. So the
Yes,
first,
I know. I'm rapid fire.
No. And if I forget any, I'm confident you'll prompt
All
me.
right.
The first picture book really was quite personal, like women that had been brought into my life by my kind of grandmother, my mother, my father, as people they wanted me to know, kind of had done extraordinary things, and kind of to give me purposefully like female role models to look up to. Some were ones that I literally watched with my parents. I mean, as I've told Rita, like I grew up watching a lot of Olympics. We didn't actually watch that much television, but we watched a lot of, well, Arkansas college sports, not surprising, because when I was a little kid, my dad was governor of Arkansas, and a lot of Olympics. And I remember watching, from our little like TV room in Little Rock, Arkansas, FloJo at the '88 Olympics, like just obliterate the world records, which she still holds today in her marquee events. And I'd never seen a human being do anything like that. And so just this sense of awe, and I never thought that I could run that fast or as fast as Jack Rabbit, but it had this really powerful impact on me of like, oh, like we can do extraordinary things. Like I maybe can't do that extraordinary thing, but I can do something extraordinary. And it wasn't until kind of much later in life that I'd had a similar conversation with my grandmother about when she had watched Wilma Rudolph run. And my grandmother also feeling like, wow, she didn't know women athletes could do that. And then the sense of like, well, if women athletes can do that, what can women do? What can I do? And so just really mindful, Meg, to your question of all the kind of conversations that I also had been lucky enough to have prompted by these extraordinary women. And so the first book really was a reflection of kind of women that had all meant a great deal to me as a daughter, as a granddaughter, as a sports fan, as a student, as a public health professional, as a kind of person who'd wanted to be an astronaut but had terrible eyes, so knew I could never be an astronaut. I mean, all sorts of kind of different threads that came together. And then because of the reaction of young readers and so many people asking, well, where can I go to learn more, particularly about the women like FloJo who didn't have a book written about them, which is just extraordinary to think. Thankfully, my wonderful editor, Jill, who's here from Penguin, and others said, well, we should turn kind of the She Persisted picture book series kind of into its next logical kind of development as a chapter book series. And so the first were kind of very much from the original chapter book, and then it's just been this ongoing conversation from authors that I really respect, from my editor, from kind of whatever's rattling around in my kind of heart and brain, to now also my children making suggestions. And Meg, to your point earlier about kind of what has happened, I think, for kind of the permissiveness in a wonderful way for boys to have women role models, I've seen that very powerfully as the mother of sons. Like particularly my middle son, who loves math, loves science, like thinks Katherine Johnson was like the smartest person ever because she like literally created math that helped, send all sorts of stuff and people to space. Thinks like Wonder Woman is like the coolest superhero because she has this lasso that everybody has to tell the truth if she like wraps it around you. Like, the first astronauts he learned about were Sally Ride and Mae Jemison, and then he learned about Neil Armstrong. He's sort of like, oh, Neil Armstrong, okay. And it's just like, so I see real time. Now, granted, it's because he thinks his sister is like the most important person ever. I mean, he loves me a lot, but really his older sister is like, the most important person to him. So I'm not unaware of the influence that she has, but I also do believe if we didn't have the culture that kind of permitted boys to have enthusiasm, not just admiration, but enthusiasm about women role models, historical, contemporary, and fictional, he wouldn't have that same galvanized sense that I really see in him, where he doesn't feel like he's doing anything cool or edgy. Like it's just sort of like, oh, these are the women that I look up to, and even more so like, these are just the people that I look up to.
Yeah. Have there been surprises along the way as you've rolled out the series?
Oh goodness. I think particularly in the first book tour around She Persisted, it was always surprising, like in different parts, not even so much parts of the country, maybe it's just like different parts of the tour, like what kids like had really latched onto is like everyone wanted to talk about like this person, maybe, right? And hard to know if like did the fifth and sixth person want to talk about, I don't know, whether it's like Sally Ride or Helen Keller or Sonia Sotomayor because like the first four people had wanted to talk about it and they're like, but that's what the cool kids do? I don't know, but that's what I found surprising and always energizing and just so fun. And then of course, I somehow was always surprised when kids came dressed.
Yes.
And I shouldn't have been.
As the person.
Right.
As the
like, because
person
after that it happened a couple times, but I still was like, oh my gosh, there is like a little Sonia Sotomayor. Wow, you're wearing a very long wig. You're channeling FloJo. Like I know who we're inspired by. That always felt just surprising and fun, like for me, to then hear why there wasn't just a sense of inspiration, but like I'm so inspired. I'm like dressing up. It's not Halloween, but I'm dressing up to come to this book event because I want to show how inspired I am, like in full presence.
I love that about kids just generally. I like when I go to the supermarket or something and I find Spider-Man next to me and next to the peppers or something. It's fun, right? It's like, oh, hello, Spidey.
One of my favorite, so I live in New York City, where I've lived longer than anywhere else, and I love New York City. I'm hopefully not one of those insufferable people who don't believe there aren't other places in the world worth living, like DC and Little Rock, where I was lucky enough to grow up in both places. But I love New York. One of my favorite moments in New York City is I got off the subway one day and I was walking home, and this was, I don't know, maybe like 18 months ago, and there were these two little boys on the corner engaged in this just intense conversation about like who was a better superhero. Like was it
That could get violent.
Was it Spider-Man or was it Superman? And like just like this intense conversation that I just was like mesmerized by, and you could see the mom just sort of being like, I don't know. And then this other little kid walked by nonchalantly and was like, you're both wrong, it's Iron Man. And just like kept going. Like, and I was like, this was amazing. I'm so glad that I saw this.
Okay, so let's get to the nitty-gritty of how we write books like this, right? So I hadn't written nonfiction before I agreed to write the Sonia Sotomayor book. So I will admit to you here for the first time ever that I was terrified, because I write fiction and you can't do that, right? When you're covering someone's life, especially not someone who's still living and can come for you, right? So you gotta really get your facts straight. So for me, for both the Pura Belpré book and for Sonia Sotomayor, it was really training myself and how to handle archives and dig in and so on. Um, what was the process for you, Rita? Because you write, I understand that you write your drafts longhand. Like, what was your writing process for FloJo?
Well,
And in general?
well, the first mantra was, you can't make it up.
Yeah.
You cannot make it up. If it's not a fact, you cannot say it.
Yes, yes.
This was so hard. That was the hardest thing, was that I could not just, oh, I can make this parallel. All I have to do is tweak that. I had to calm down and just really dive into her life. And luckily, wow, I was gifted with a person who had such a full life. And we're talking about someone who did not grow up, wealthy or well off, or, the family struggled. In fact, the parents had to separate early. So, and there were 11 siblings. So, so it was a big family. But I got to just look at her as a person in the family, and a person by herself kind of developing. And from there, I could feel her young voice amongst the other siblings, and how she was always kind of zooming around the house. And so that just kind of gave me a sense of her presence. And it was when she braided her hair to stick straight up and went to school like that, that I fell in love.
Oh,
and
too.
so I got really into, once I began to really feel all those little things that she did, crafting the story of her life, I felt guided by her childhood self into her adult self.
Okay, so let me tell you, I struggled with that with Pura Belpré. So if you don't know, Pura Belpré was the first Afro-Latina librarian in the New York Public Library system. It's thanks to Pura that we have collections that really reflect a wide range of kids in libraries. So an archive, I don't know if you guys found this, an archive for the young people here is a collection of materials collected from that person's life. You'd think that everything would be in there, but there were 2 different birth certificates for Pura Belpré with different dates. There was a lot of information that she talked about and shared about her adult life, but almost nothing about her childhood. And so that's a choice that someone makes. And you can't fill it with a conjecture, right? I can't guess why she did that. So part of the issue that I had is that this series, what I love about it is that it captures these remarkable women as girls, right? When they were young. But Pura didn't want us to know very, very much about that. So I had to really think about how I was going to frame that. But the notion of who these women were at the beginning, was that always like your thrust for the chapter book series?
Absolutely. And for anyone who's read more than kind of one of the chapter books, they do follow a cadence, partly because we wanted it to be kind of familiar for people who would be reading, more than one, but also because we really wanted to signal the significance of sharing whatever we would know about these extraordinary women from their childhood. Because I think, I certainly see this now as a parent, like my kids are fascinated. My kids are in 3rd grade, 2nd grade, and then in preschool, about like, well, like, Mom, what did you do in 2nd grade? Yeah. I'm like, well, I had Mrs. Huey, and she made really delicious pumpkin pie. It's like one of the things I really remember. And I'm like, and we had spelling tests. I'm like, oh gosh, and there was maybe early multiplication, but I really am trying to excavate like what happened in 2nd grade. And I'm like, oh, but then I remember we did this in church or this in ballet, or I can remember other things that were happening outside of school. But I also try to be really candid, similar to what we were even just talking about around kind of the faithfulness to facts of like, well, I don't really remember if this was in second grade or fourth grade.
Right.
Like it was around that time. But I just see as a parent how important it is for our children to understand our origin stories because they're trying to understand where their stories could go next. And so I think helping children realize, like, yes, like FloJo, as we were saying earlier, did have this just kind of irrepressible spirit, right? Truly, when her teacher asked her when she was in elementary school, like, well, what do you want to be? And she said, I want to be everything, right? I think it's really good for kids to hear that, to read that, I guess, in this instance, or have it read to them, to then see, well, where did she take that belief in her own potential? And she took it to some really extraordinary places. And so it was important, Meg, as we kind of were conceptualizing the series and now as kind of we've all collectively stewarded it, that there be kind of whatever we know about kind of these extraordinary women's childhoods as the first chapter so that kids can kind of root themselves kind of to these women at the age that they are now when they're reading these books in the hopes that the rest of their stories feel more tangible to them and more catalytic to whatever their own dreams may be.
Yeah. I found, I find them all remarkable. And it's so interesting because you know them as adults, right? And you read these books and you can see the beginning. Like you could see how those dots would connect. That has always felt really fascinating to me. Like Sonia Sotomayor, as we know, has diabetes, and when she was very young, her mom was a nurse and worked lots of hours, and her father was afraid of needles and couldn't help her with the insulin. So at like 5 years old, she said, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And she started to take care of her own health. So it's just fascinating. The other thing is, one thing is that they're remarkable, and the other part is how completely relatable and ordinary they are as children as well, right? Who have tantrums, who disobey, who, things like that, right?
And that life isn't always a straight line,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I think as now we've talked about, Meg and I, a lot today and before coming out and then with Rita and now, a little bit with all of you, is that we're like super into science and space in our family. And so I think one of the things that was just bewildering, I mean, surprising, but bewildering was when my daughter and then also when my next oldest son was reading the book about Sally Ride, like initially she wanted to be a tennis player, right? And they were like, what? Like, why didn't she just always want to go to space? Like, well, I mean, I don't, because she wanted to be a tennis player, and she was really good at tennis, but she wasn't quite good enough to be a professional tennis player. And she was really, really good at math and science. And so she thought, all right, well, I've worked really hard at this, but that's clearly not my pathway, but I'm going to go get a PhD in physics, which was really unrare at the time for a woman to pursue. And she was at Stanford and pursuing a kind of PhD in physics, and then saw in the newspaper that NASA was opening its astronaut program for the first time to women. And she thought, well, maybe I'll apply. And she did, and she was accepted. And as they say, the rest is history. But had she been even a little bit better at tennis, right, she might have had a different path. And so our children couldn't get over this. And like, well, because sometimes our dreams change because we learn new things. We sometimes kind of reach a closed door in one arena and then have to find an open door somewhere else. We meet new people who inspire us and challenge us in new ways. So that is another part of the books that I think is also really important. Like, sometimes it's not your kind of first ambition, and that still can be a remarkable, extraordinary life of meaning and inspiration for you and little kids too.
Well, we have come to the time when you get to pepper us with all of your questions. So Anya has a microphone, and you can feel free to ask us anything.
Hello, ladies. Good afternoon, I should say. My name's Kimberly Moon. I'm actually a librarian here in the district, and I'm persisting through this author visit with my tiny human here. Um, my question is, are you open to curating a story that talks about persisting with tiny humans, being a teenage mom to little tiny humans who are very curious and confident in their abilities to know and grow and do more than mom, but mom is still persisting through teaching them that they do not know everything. Not saying, it's just something to think about to add to the series, but thank you, ladies. Just say hello. Hello. Hello.
Questions?
Although suggestions are also welcome.
Who are the women do you have any women in mind that you think deserve a book? Aha!
Well, one of my favorite persons, Michelle Obama. Do you have that on your list?
Do you think she's done anything to maybe warrant?
And I'm not done.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, no, yeah. You can have more than one.
And your wonderful mom.
Oh, thank you, yes.
So those two. You think?
Okay, I think those are two very good suggestions. Okay. Maybe.
So this, remember Miss Martha made the suggestion.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Miss Martha.
Thank you.
Yes, and I would say to the earlier comment, one of the women who will have a book coming out this year is Dolores Huerta, who did have her first child when she herself was still a teenager, and certainly persisted over an extraordinary life while being a mom to 9 kids. She had her first child before she turned 20, and she had her last child, I think at 48 maybe. She had children over many decades, and all of them, and I have spoken to a number of them, whether they wanted to or not, and some did and some did not, were part of her work. Because she was like, I can't leave you at home. You have to come with me. And she talks about how she had to parent while being a movement leader and helping her children feel like, yes, they could do different things, but right now they had to do her thing while also still getting them to eat their vegetables and not jump off a railing. So I hope maybe that book will be particularly resonant to the first questioner.
Have you ever thought of making a book of Corrie ten Boom?
Say the name again.
Corrie ten Boom. Of the Ten Boom sisters.
I haven't.
Tell us more about Corrie ten Boom.
Yeah.
So I think it was in World War that they were letting people go into their house, but then their neighbor told on them, and they were thrown in prison.
Well, I think all of us are going to learn more about Corrie ten Boom. Hopefully not just us up on this stage, but I see people writing it down and Googling it right now in the audience. So thank you for teaching us about someone we clearly should know about and we'll learn more about.
Hi. My name is Chelsea, and have you ever thought about making a book about your mother?
I haven't really, is the honest answer, because maybe my whole life people have asked me, well, what do you think your mom would say, or what do you think your dad would say? And I just have always said, well, you can ask them. And so, admittedly, that might just be kind of the inevitable byproduct of kind of those 4 decades of kind of reactions and responses. I have, though, been very kind of proud and grateful to have had the experience to write a couple of books with my mom. And so I think if it were something I were doing with her, that I could 100% get on board with. But I think it would feel awkward to do it without her.
So who's got her number? Let's call her. Right? Don't you think this is the opportunity, people? Okay.
Hi. Have you ever thought of making a book about yourself?
I not really. So I have been asked and had offers to write a book about myself. And I know there are people much younger than I am who've written their autobiographies, and maybe because I've told my children that I'm going to live to be at least 100, I just feel like there's so much life left to live. So maybe at some point, but not now.
Hi there. My name is Nona Safra, and I come from Alaska, so I'm probably from the furthest away of anybody here. Hi. This Chelsea is my granddaughter. We're on a trip. Part of the trip is I'm teaching her to do advocacy, because that's what I do in Alaska. So I am very grateful for you to do this. One of my heroes in Alaska is Elizabeth, I'm going to butcher her last name, Petrovich, who was an amazing Native Alaskan woman who did a lot for civil rights there. I think she'd be excellent for writing a book about. And I will tell you that as a more senior woman in our society, I lecture a lot because I do teach people how to do self-advocacy and to make sure that I'm passing on that skill to the next generation. And I usually start by telling people that the people that I learned from were people like Eleanor Roosevelt and Helen Keller, because I met them. And that usually starts a whole conversation because I'm really that old, you know. So.
No, well, one of the books my mom and I wrote together is called The Book of Gutsy Women. We actually write about Elizabeth in the book because she was so central to securing the right to vote for women in Alaska, and then so central to ensuring that Alaska lived up to its Justice Department requirements of ensuring that kind of voting information and kind of public information broadly was available in all of the widely spoken kind of First Nations and Indigenous Alaskan languages. I though also was thinking while you were speaking about the most recent book that came out in the She Persisted chapter book series about Opal Lee, because one of the many reasons I find Opal Lee so inspiring, who is the reason why Juneteenth is a national holiday, is because she first started working to make Juneteenth a holiday in the 1970s. And it became a holiday in 2021 when President Biden kind of signed the congressional act that had kind of legally made, you know, Juneteenth a federal holiday. So she worked on something for decades. And I think that is an important point too. When we think about persisting, it's often kind of you persisted through the specific challenge, but sometimes it's you persisted over many decades through many challenges, and you truly just never gave up. And Opal Lee is 97 years old, and she still travels, not only around her hometown of Fort Worth, but particularly around Texas, teaching still today people younger than her, which is most of us, about kind of Juneteenth and why it is so important that it has become a national kind of federal holiday. And so I think what you said is so powerful around not only, you know, meeting our heroes, but recognizing how often, as I think about it, like we still have to learn from our grandmothers and our great-grandmothers who are continuing to help push us forward.
Hi, my name is Sophia. What do you enjoy most about being an author, or specifically the author of the She Persisted books?
I enjoy knowing that I'm part of this collection of books that exists in schools a lot. You know, a lot of schools have adopted this book, and libraries and so on. And just, it feels exciting to know that I'm supporting women and women throughout history, and how kids can sort of rescue those ordinary heroes from history. It's easy to forget people as time goes on, right? And when someone has a book about them, they're there forever in a way. How about you?
Well, the thing that I enjoy about being a writer, being an author, is, you know, well, I used to always write my little stories and jump in front of the TV set while my sister was watching Days of Our Life or whatever. And Rosin, you want to hear my story? It's really good. And before she could answer, I'd start reading, Once Upon a Time. Anyway, but you all are now my sisters, and I'm jumping in front of you all, telling you about whatever story that I've written and my experiences. That's the thing that I think I really enjoy. Yes, I love having written a story and all that good stuff, but it's the sharing it with you, with readers, knowing people will read the book and want to read it. That's the cherry on the top for me. And about the She Persisted series, it's digging into the lives of these extraordinary women and finding out not just the things that we always see in the newspaper or in the press kit, but the things about them when they were growing up that reminds us that, wow, we were all them at one point.
Yeah, I mean, I just so strongly echo everything that Meg and Rita said, and I guess just would answer it also in a slightly different way. When I think about the nonfiction books I've written, those have often been motivated by things I wish I had known when I was a kid. So I wrote a book a few years ago called Start Now, You Can Make a Difference, and it really kind of was oriented toward elementary school age kids, and it was just full of stuff I wish I had known when I was that age, when I kind of was so curious about, well, what is clean water? What is clean air? How do we kind of think about kind of all of the letters and numbers on the back of like a multivitamin bottle? Like, what do those mean? Like, why do you need all of those? And I don't know, isn't like calcium the thing that's in our bones? It's already in our body. Why do I need more of it? And so that also is a reason why I write, to answer questions sometimes I've heard from others, but sometimes actually to answer the questions I had as a kid that I couldn't find the easy answers to.
Yes, a suggestion and a question. In this time with the xenophobic politics and the blaming the other, both at home and abroad, I was wondering about if you would look at getting people from other non-English speaking cultures to make contributions on the people who are their heroes, so you would understand from a non-domestic background how they feel and why they feel that way, particularly both on non-Christian, non-white, non-such. And also, because of the lack of translation of other languages into English, are there, particularly like in Meg's program and such, are there efforts to get translated stories to the youth as well, so that they understand the perspective of the other instead of the demonized or fake version they see on TV and movies?
I think your first suggestion is a really good one. Your second suggestion, all of our books are in English and Spanish, and some of them have also been translated into other languages, but not as universally as they have been into Spanish. And one thing not related to kind of She Persisted, but that I am particularly proud of, kind of that we've done at the Clinton Foundation, was all throughout kind of the depths of COVID. We worked with a number of Native communities to help secure funding, and then kind of the other resources that are required to publish books about COVID, but also about kind of family and community in challenging times in a number of Native and Indigenous languages. And so that, I think, is work that hopefully, while started during COVID, won't stop kind of with COVID.
We probably have time for one last question. Aha, hi.
Hello, fellow ladies and authors. God bless you. I just want to say congratulations on your literary journey, and may you continue to succeed. Amen. Okay, God bless you.
Amen, amen.
That's lovely. I don't understand sign language. They're doing this. Over to you, Anya.
I just wanted to say thank you all for coming, of course, and please buy books. There's books here, and all three authors would be delighted to sign them. So thank you so much. Come again. Have a good day.